Welcome to Discourse. I am Susil Pandey. Nepal has adopted a federal system through the new constitution. As a new federal state, it may have a lot of problems, though it can learn many things from other federal states across the world. Today, I am going to talk with an Australian federal expert, Mr. Jason Chavrias, on the possible challenges of federal Nepal. Mr. Jason has a wide knowledge on federalism of different countries throughout the globe. And now he talks on the pros and cons of Nepali federalism and new constitution. Mr. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
You are from Australia and now living in New Zealand, and you are an expert on federalism. And Nepal has been already federated itself, and it is facing some problems. What do you want to suggest to Nepal, and what Nepal learned from Australia and New Zealand or other countries? What do you think?
I think that federalism is a significant challenge, and even in advanced countries like Australia, there is ongoing challenges of how to create the right balance between the powers of the state government and the powers of the national government. So even that Nepal is in a very early stage of adopting federalism, it's important to recognize that these challenges are not going to be fixed overnight. They'll be ongoing, and they require long discussions and good collaboration between all parties in terms of ethnic parties, regional groups, political parties, the bureaucracy, the civic society and media can all play a very important role.
Mm-hmm. What do you think? Does Nepali federalism address the expectations, demands and aspirations of Nepali people in a real sense?
Well, I hope that it will, but there are some really significant risks and challenges ahead for Nepali federalism. I would like to say that from the perspective of Australian federalism, we have a constitution that provided for a lot of power and autonomy at the state level, which was giving lots of opportunities for trying different approaches and tailoring services and government services to the different needs of people throughout the country. Over time, the experience in Australia is that the federal government has had more and more and more power over time, such that the differences between the states now are much less than they would be under another scenario, and much less than I think was envisaged by the people that originally developed the Constitution of Australia. The challenge for Nepal and the expectations are that people through federalism will be able to get a government that is tailoring its services to the local community, changing their priorities and needs according to the needs of local communities. Yeah. But the question remains whether in the context of Nepali federalism, whether that power will be truly handed over, whether the finances and funding will be made available, particularly if there is a different political government at the provincial level compared to the state level. And in the constitution of Nepal, there are a lot of powers that are shared by the national government and the provincial government. The question is, in Nepali federalism, in coming years, will the federal government stand back and allow the provinces to do the work that will give the local citizens the services in the way that they would like? Or will they then use their power to try to standardize everything across Nepal? That's been the case in Australia. We'll have to see how it plays out in Nepal.
How can Australia manage such kind of problems?
In Australia, the challenges are ongoing. We recently had a reform of the federation process which tried to reset the balance between the state and the provincial levels of power. But that process did not, has not yet resulted in any particular changes. The challenges are also challenges of finances. One of the really important aspects of federalism in Australia is that a lot of the taxes are raised by the national government, but a lot of the services, like hospitals and schools, police, are delivered by the state governments. Unfortunately, what that means is that the states don't have enough money to deliver
in the provincial level.
At the provincial level, that's right. They don't have enough money. And as a result, they have to ask the federal government for money to
What
conduct the
about
services.
Nepal? What do you think? What should Nepal do? in that regards to resolve such kind of possible problems in the future?
I think that the Constitution of Nepal should focus very heavily initially on establishing very strong institutions to help maintain the balance between provinces and federal government. In particular, the Constitution of Nepal sets out a Natural Resources and Fiscal Commission. And this commission is meant to be slightly separate from governments, and it's meant to be able to make an independent judgment of how the taxes that are raised should be spread amongst the different tiers of government, federal, provincial and local. Not because of politics, but because of an objective formula for dispersing the money in a way that is meeting the different needs of the levels of government. I think an immediate challenge for Nepal is to make sure that that institution, the Natural Resources and Fiscal Commission, has the right skills and expertise, is sufficiently independent from politics and from the federal and provincial governments to make an independent judgment of how much money should be given to each level of government, so that there is the appropriate amount of money going to each level so that they can do a good job.
Okay. You know about the Nepali constitution also, yeah? You know some provinces of Nepali constitution also, procedures of Nepali constitution also, provisions of Nepali constitution also. And what do you think, what can Nepal do to resolve such kind of possible crisis in terms of financial problems? For example, as you have told that Australia may be facing such kind of problem between the central government, federal government and the provinces. And how can we resolve such kind of problem?
One of the challenges that I think is really important in the context of Nepal is to focus as much on revenue raising as on spending.
Yeah.
So most of the conversations I've been part of here in Nepal have been on how can we share the taxes that are raised? How can we ensure that the money flows from the federal government to the provincial government to local government? I think that the conversation in Nepal should also equally be about how can we raise the right amounts of money? To be focused on...
raising is important than spending?
It's equally important, right? Because without raising there is no spending. So, from my perspective, there should be a conversation about, at the local level, at the provincial level, at the federal level, how can we best raise the taxes we need to provide the services that Nepali people need? If we want good healthcare, that must be paid for. So how is the taxation coming about? How is the economic activity, not in government, but in the private sector, that can be then taxed, how is that being fostered and developed? And one of the real challenges for Nepal is not federalism, but just of good economic development in the first place. You need to have strong focus on the economy so that government can raise the money to deliver the services that people need. You need a good economy for the government to be able to afford healthcare. You need a good economy for the government to be able to afford education, and so on and so forth. So a quality education, quality healthcare, quality services for minority groups, and inclusion of ethnic groups in society, all of that is based on there being a strong economy with enough money and enough taxation to fund those services and to fund that inclusion. And so for my challenge to people in Nepal is, what are you doing about economic development? How are you going to create the conditions for a good economy, a good life outside of government, not just within?
Is it possible that sometimes it may happen, for example, central government will collect the revenue, taxation, it will impose, but it may suggest to the provincial government, do yourself about the healthcare, about the education and other expenses. And at that time, what can province sustain or maintain such kind of thing?
It's a very important part of the dynamic in Australian federalism as well as probably in Nepali federalism. The central government will be able to raise more taxes than the provinces, and will be able to raise more taxes than the local government. That will always be the case, and the constitution in Nepal gives most of the tax powers to the federal government. But if the provincial government is responsible for education or responsible for healthcare, and they need that money, the money must be passed over to the provincial government in a way that doesn't have conditions. If the provincial governments only receive money on the basis of the federal government saying, you must do this with the money, you must spend it in this way, then there's going to be no differences between the provinces. It's just going to be more bureaucracy, but no better outcomes for Nepali people. So the challenge is, how will you raise the money at the federal level transfer the money to the provincial level without telling the provincial governments how to do their job. You must respect the local democracy, that the people in that region have voted for a particular government, hand the money over, and allow that province to spend the money in the way that meets their local needs.
But unfortunately, they are not discussing on this matter. They are discussing whether to federate the country in terms of identity or viability, or whether to put more priority to the identity or economic viability. What do you think? How should Nepal federate it, though it has already been federated? And what do you think? What would be a suggestion to federate it in terms of identity or focusing more on economic viability?
I think that there needs to be a balance of many factors, and I don't think those are the only two factors involved. So I do agree that that it is important to consider identity, and it is important to consider viability. My suggestion is that it's not one or the other. So if you have one that's only based on identity, there may be some challenges. If you have one that's only based on viability, there will be some different challenges.
What about Australia?
Australia's circumstance is very different, and most federations in the world already had the provincial level of government before they created the federal level of government. Now, there's a small number of countries that have approached federalism in the way that Nepal has, but it's very much not the way that has happened in most other democracies, in most other federations. So, in Australia, the provinces came first, and they joined together to create a federal government.
Oh.
And that's the case in most other federations like Canada as well.
Unlike Nepal, because
not
Nepal
like
is a
Nepal.
unitary
That's
country,
right.
and we are federating now.
That's right. So the challenges for Nepal in considering these issues are large ones, and it's because in many cases Nepal is treading a path that has not been treaded by other countries before. That means if you recognise that,
Okay.
you have to recognise that it will be a slow and gradual process.
I would like to interrupt you right here. That means Nepal would apply more decentralization than applying federalism. So some also argue like that. What
That's
do you
possible,
think?
but I think the people have already chosen federalism. The constitution has been promulgated. We already are in a federal republic. The idea that decentralization is better than federalism, I can't say that that's necessarily true or not, and much of that will depend on how the Nepalese people go about creating their own federation. Because this must be a federation that is suitable for Nepal. You can't take the model of Canada or of Germany or of South Africa and just adopt it in Nepal. It must be the right governance for the people of Nepal. And for that to happen, you need everyone to join in a national conversation. People in Kathmandu, people in the provinces, people in the villages, people in the lowlands and people in the highlands. Everyone must be a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
And one thing I think that is an important part of federalism for Nepal is to make sure that there is a better awareness and education and understanding of what federalism is, including amongst the people that maybe are not central here in Kathmandu.
Yeah.
So education campaigns and awareness campaigns that the government could undertake to help people understand what federalism is, and also what it's not, are really important parts of the process from here.
Okay. Yeah, you have suggested to engage in dialogue, but the reality is now Tarai people, especially Malay's political parties, are agitating for long 4 months. Okay. And now government is trying to resolve such kind of problem by amending the constitutions. A proposal of constitution amendment was tabled in the parliament. Now, what do you think, as an expert, what do you suggest to resolve such kind of problem?
I am sceptical as to whether the constitutional amendment will address all of the needs of all of the drivers of why there's unrest and agitation in some parts of Nepal. One of the things that I think is an important backdrop to this conversation is that you can't do everything inside a constitution, and you shouldn't try to do everything inside a constitution. So there are many good things about the Nepali constitution. In particular, there are many clauses and references within the constitution to inclusivity, to equality, to representation, that goes much further than many constitutions around the world, including the Constitution of Australia.
Really?
Yes, And it is possibly a leading constitution in the world in respect of those references and clauses which appear throughout the constitution in many, many ways. And in that case, it's worth saying that I think that part of the constitution, Nepal is a leader, and it's made much good progress, and in many cases is better than some of the constitutions that have come from more advanced nations like Australia. So Nepal should be proud of that. And I think that maybe one of the challenges here is that people don't recognize how good the Nepali constitution in that respect is. Do people in the regions, have they read it? Do they understand what it means? Do they know what type of provisions are already there in the constitution? They're very good ones, and there's lots of them. But I think awareness and understanding is very low. So there are people with some challenges in this country. The first message for me is that federalism will not solve all of them. There are other challenges outside of federalism, and they must be addressed too. And looking to federalism to answer all the problems is not a good way forward. But the other side is to reflect on what good provisions are already there. And in many cases, there's a lot of good quality in terms of inclusion, particularly for minority groups, inside the constitution already.
What are those provisions that you like most in the Nepali constitution?
Well, there are some provisions, as I was saying, that already speak to the idea of inclusion of women and minority ethnic groups, people from different castes.
But some people say that there is lack of proportional representations in the constitution.
Oh, that's true. So the issue of whether representation is proportional is a question. But you should recognise that in some constitutions there is no reference to inclusion at all.
Oh.
So in some ways you have to take a view that this will roll out over time. That you don't have to solve all of the challenges of the nation today, right now. And constitutions evolve and change. But also there are ways of doing social inclusion programs that are they don't have to be prescribed by the constitution. I think perhaps it's an aspect of Nepal's history that people think that unless it's written in detail and prescribed in the constitution, it won't happen. Well, the example of other federations show that federalism itself is a way of driving better inclusion. For example, in the country I'm from, Australia, there were some minority groups that weren't able to vote and participate in elections. And the constitution did not specify that they should be able to participate in the elections, but one state chose to allow that. When one state chose to allow that, the other states chose to allow that after the time, and then eventually the federal government chose to provide for this minority group to vote in the elections. That wasn't part of the constitution initially, but federalism offers an opportunity for the provinces to take their own approach and have diversity around the different parts of the nation, including diversity in showing leadership, and that could be in the area of inclusion. So for example, if there was a province that was more progressive and wanted to make some provisions for the inclusion of women or people from lower castes or what have you, then they're free to do so under the constitution. So you need to allow federalism to work, and that work is not 1 year or 2 years. These things happen over time. And the expectation that Nepali federalism will automatically deliver the benefits of...
In the future, I'm asking that right now, what do you think, how should Nepali government resolve such kind of problem?
Well, the other thing I would say about resolving the problem is that you need to address the issues outside of federalism.
Outside federalism?
So if we're talking about access to health, access to good education, participation in society, that's not participation in government. Those issues are outside of federalism. And on the one hand, one of the things that I see about Nepali federalism is that we are overly focused on inclusion in government institutions, but not sufficiently focused on inclusion in other parts of society. What's our economic representation? How can we start our own businesses? How can we have an economic activity that supports my family, my region, and my province? And so, again, I would say, the focus is too much on federalism, the focus is too much on government, and we need to shift the balance in Nepal to talking about what happens outside of life in government, including economic development, health and education.
And then, what are other challenges that Nepal can face in the future?
This relates to the previous question, which is I think that there are many opportunities for Nepal to improve, and sometimes those will be completely independent of federalism, sometimes they will relate.
Okay,
One example that is an pertinent example is in trust in government.
Mr. Jason, I'm asking these questions in the view of Nepal is a very small country in terms of geography. Yeah, you can say that, but in terms of diversity, Nepal is not a small country. It is very big because you have more than 100 plus castes and other indigenous groups, and their aspirations are much higher now because they are demanding separate province also. They are focusing on their identity also. And sometimes they are not giving any emphasis to the economic viability, as you said. And in that condition, there is a big question: can federalism work in a country like Nepal?
It can work, but I think that one of the challenges is for the Nepali people to look beyond the next step. So in many cases, I hear calls for ethnic groups to have their own province, so that their ethnicity can be represented in the Nepali state, and that they can have a form of self-government and self-determination. My response to that is that because of the level of diversity, it's impossible for everybody to be represented with their own province. And that's not the right way to go about it. My challenge is to say that putting aside the issue of demarcation, it's just impractical to have that many governments. It would be not the right way to deal with it. And so again, I would say that the challenge for Nepal is to say, how can we live closer together? How can we try different techniques to be inclusive, to share power within shared regions? Not always looking for having self-government, but joining together as a people. Federalism will not solve the issue. Federalism can only bring to life the degree to which Nepali people want to become part of and continue to be part of the Nepali nation.
Then you think that Nepal has a bright future inside this federalism?
I think that there is a great opportunity for Nepal to pursue a form of federalism that works for Nepal. The challenge for Nepal is to be sure that all of the voices of the Nepalese people are part of that conversation. And that for me means a greater focus on education and awareness, a greater focus on understanding at the district and the ward and the village level of what federalism means and what the other challenges beyond federalism are that Nepal needs to address.
As an expert, what do you want to suggest to Nepali people, Nepali government, and the different indigenous people that are demanding their own provinces? Do you want to suggest anything to them?
I want to suggest that everyone should take a measured approach to the introduction of federalism. In many countries, including Australia, federalism was a slow process that took decades to come about. It was not 1 year, it was not 5 years, it was really over a very long period of time.
It may be taken more than 1 century also sometimes?
Sometimes it can take a long time. And that's to the point of achieving a federation, but that federations always evolve. That the idea of a federation is that you are not fixed in one way of doing things, but that there is an opportunity to change over time. And the idea that we need to get everything right now is a really big burden for the country of Nepal. It has other challenges, as you know, and those challenges are pressing day-to-day issues for people living their lives. I think that the expectations on federalism are high. Federalism can, in time, deliver good benefits, but to put too much time pressure on federalism suggests that federalism can be an answer to things that aren't really about federalism. And I would say, if you look to the experiences of other nations, that the federation evolves and changes over time as the people change over time. And that, for me, is really one of the important parts of federalism, is that it is not a static, single way of doing things. Nepal has chosen a more flexible form of government. That's a great thing. But flexibility means that there is change, not just now, but in the future. That means that over time, Nepal can have a federation that will underpin a very prosperous nation.
You know about the Nepali federalism and Nepali constitution also. And what do you think? Is Nepali federalism directed toward the right direction?
There are some challenges, and I think that if we don't start off on the right foot, it could be that their federalism has, in the short term, more negative consequences than positive ones. So, the question is, how do we set off on the right path? And I think from that perspective...
My question is whether Nepali federalism is directed toward right or
Well,
wrong, or what do you think as an expert, I'm asking?
It's too early to say, but I think there are risks.
Yeah.
So my challenge to people in Nepal that are involved in federalism is you have the opportunity to put it in the right direction. I think that...
it means it is in wrong direction now?
It's not in the wrong direction, but it hasn't had enough time to show which way it's going.
Yeah.
It's in the middle right now. It can go in the wrong direction, but it can go in the right direction. And it's an important time for leadership. It's an important time for, in particular, the leaders of Nepal to think about Nepal in the individual political parties. Here is the time for leadership. If that happens, the opportunity for Nepali federalism is very bright.
If that would not happen, then?
Pardon?
For example, if Nepali leadership, you know about the Nepali politics also, yeah?
I know a little bit.
Little bit. Now Nepal is facing a kind of Indian blockade, and you may be also facing some inconvenience due to that. I'm very sorry for that. What I'm saying is, Nepal is entangled in such a crisis, historical crisis, and as you have suggested that Nepali people must rise upon their more beyond their self-interest. And do you think any hint or any positive sign Nepal is heading toward that?
I think there are some positive signs, and it might not be easily visible by people on the ground. So firstly, I think the challenge is mostly for Nepalese leaders. I understand that for many people in Nepal, their day-to-day lives are consumed by some of these issues. And given the state of Nepali development, I understand that. But it's the leaders who have representing their people that are the ones that need to look forward. But yes, there are some positive signs. So I would say that the constitution itself, the fact that you have established a federal constitution which has very strong aims in respect of equality, in respect of inclusion, which, like I said before, goes beyond many constitutions, including the Constitution of Australia and many other advanced nations, that is something to be celebrated. That is something that more people should know about, because a commitment has been made by the leaders of this country to head in the direction of equality and inclusiveness and collaboration. Now, that was one piece in time in the Constitution. The challenge now is to say, we've made that commitment.
Yeah.
Now, as leaders, we need to follow through on that commitment. Make that the reality for people's lives.
But you know that most of the people, for example, the Tarai people are agitating and they are rejecting the new constitution. The government is trying to amend the constitution, and the amendment proposal was rejected by the agitators also. That is the situation. And do you have any suggestions to resolve such kind of situation?
Well, I think that the issues with the people in the Tarai are broader than just the issues of the Constitution. As I said before, there are some things that the Constitution can do, but there are other things that can be done as well. And looking to the Constitution to solve all the problems will not be a good solution. There must be dialogue. There must be engagement.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's inherent in a federation...
But that is not happening. Dialogue and engagement is not happening in all.
No. And I think that that's where the leaders of the people that are involved need to, again, step beyond their individual interests and think about what is in the best interests of Nepal as a federal country. As I was saying, federalism is a tension. It's designed to be a way in which people can hold different views but still stay together as a nation. It means that there will always be tensions between the provinces and the federal government, and between the provinces and local governments, and between different provinces. Those tensions are present in all federations, including in Australia, to some degree. The way that federalism deals with that is to say that those tensions are inside the system, that we'll put a governance approach around them, and that the way of dealing with those tensions is through discussion and negotiation within the federation, not through issues like violence and other techniques that are outside of the federation. So my challenge then with the current scenario is that in adopting the spirit of the federation, people must be accepting of diverse views, and they must come to a middle ground solution that works to keep Nepal united, but also respect the individual needs of the different parts of Nepal. That's the path that the Nepali people have chosen and that the leaders have chosen through the constitution. Now people need to start acting in the way that is in agreement with the constitution.
Yeah, Mr. Jason, we are at the end of the program. What do you want to suggest to Nepali people and their leaders?
I think that the challenge for Nepali leadership is a great one. But here's an opportunity for a great leadership to emerge. Not just leadership at the federal level, but federalism offers the opportunity for leaders at the provincial level and local level too. And what Nepal needs now, more than anything else, are leaders to come forward. Leaders that can understand the needs of their local communities, but also understand the needs of the nation. And federalism is the space in which that leadership can be channeled into a great and prosperous future for Nepal.
Okay, Mr. Jason, thank you very much indeed for your time and your views.
Thank you very much for having me.